Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the 4040 Vision podcast, the ultimate sports history pod where hindsight is 4040. Before we get into today's episode, let's pay some bills and hear from our presenting sponsors. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 4040 Vision podcast. I am your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by my fellow host, Salman Huck. What's going on, man? How are you?
Yo, what's going on, dude?
Not much. So today's topic is the NFC. So as you guys remember, we did a best and worst case scenarios for all of the teams in the National Football Conference. And today we wanted to look back at basically how we did, what went wrong, what we got right, all that stuff. So we're recording this on January 18th, so just before the divisional round. So by the time you hear it, some other things will definitely have happened. Some teams will have gotten knocked out, probably a couple surprises in the divisional round, as usually happens every year. But for the most part, our predictions were based on regular season success, and some of the predictions we had were about, some of the playoff scenarios and things like that. But, we didn't predict any Super Bowl winners or anything like that. It was more about divisions. So we're going to dive right in. We'll start with the NFC East. So we started with the NFC East last time because they had the highest win total projections. And Salman and I were both aligned. We went Eagles, Cowboys, Giants, Commanders in that order. And the way it shook out was Cowboys, Eagles, Giants, Commanders. So just a little bit of a flip-flop. So we'll start at the top. What did we get right about the Cowboys, and did we get anything wrong about the Cowboys?
Yeah, I think the Cowboys probably outperformed the Eagles, which we didn't expect, right? They Dak actually performed pretty well. I think I had said this is going to be probably the beginning of the end of Dak Prescott, but he proved me wrong there. So he had a pretty solid season, but they got bounced in the first round. So I don't know. Maybe Dak went back to his old ways there, but I think we
Yeah.
were spot on in terms of like great defense. The defense carried them for a few of these games, but the offense did show up, which I didn't think was going to happen.
You didn't think the offense was going to be good?
I thought I thought the offense would be okay, but like I said, I thought Dak was just going to be terrible.
Got it.
They were solid. They were good
Yeah.
offense. They were really good defense still.
He definitely had one of the best seasons of his regular season career, but obviously the way things ended in the playoffs. So, we were kind of, I guess we were both right in the sense that, this team is only going to go as far as Dak was going to carry them. But I think we should have known that the NFC East, right? It's like there hasn't been a repeat champion in like 20, 25 years or something. So we just thought, the Eagles would keep chugging along and the Cowboys would finish second. And there was, a slight switch. It wasn't like there was a huge difference between them. They were both, one was 12-5, one was 11-6. So it wasn't like a huge gulf. But
Yeah.
I think we were both spot on about the Cowboys. They're a great regular season team, as they have been for the last, 6-7 years of the Dak era. But they just flamed out in the playoffs. But that's just the Cowboys these days. So
that's just what they do these last 15 years.
Yeah, basically. And then for the Eagles, right? We said best case scenario, Super Bowl, win the division, all that stuff. Worst case scenario, they lost some key pieces on defense. They lost both coordinators. They're not as good as last year. So what did we get right? What did we get wrong?
Yeah, I think we kind of hit on that defense part, right? They lost a lot of key guys. The defense didn't look the same, but I guess the part we really missed on was Jalen Hurts just looking bad this last 1 month of the season. I don't know what happened to him. Ever since that Niner game, Nick Bosa famously is quoted as saying, "We gave teams the blueprint, right, to go ahead and stop the Eagles." And honestly, the Eagles have not looked the same since that game. I don't know if it's just like some internal locker room issues. Jalen Hurts has like been hurt maybe a little bit, things like that. But they just didn't look like the same team that that we saw up until December. And we were spot on about the Eagles up until December, and then December came, and they just looked like a completely different team that was completely lost.
Yeah, at one point they were 10-1. They lost that weird game to the Jets, but all along people were like, this is a fraudulent 10-1. Like they're not as good as their record shows. It was like, remember a few years back, I think it was either the last year or the second to last year of Ben Roethlisberger with the Steelers. They were 11-0, at one point, and then they lost by, I don't know, 30 points to the Browns in the first round. And people just knew, like, this is, it's not. Denny Green used to say, you are what your record says you are, but sometimes you're not. In this case of the Eagles, they were 10-1, but they were just fraudulent, right? I think the big thing was losing both coordinators. The defense was beyond terrible. Like, there was no excuse almost for how bad it was down the stretch. And Jalen Hurts, I think, he was hurt. He had the knee injury, and then he broke his finger. So I think those two factors, when you can't get a stop and your offense is, sometimes literally playing with one hand, then I think that's a recipe for underachieving, which is, I think it's safe to say that's what they did, despite winning 11 games.
Yeah, and then getting flamed out by Baker Mayfield in the playoffs.
Yeah. Should have seen that coming. Yeah, they finished the season 1-4, or the last 5 games they were 1-4 after starting 10-1. So yeah, not great. And then I think we can kind of lump the last two together, but Giants and Commanders. We'll go with the Giants first. We kind of predicted this. We both leaned worst case scenario that Daniel Jones was just not the guy. Be some injuries, just things would pile up, and they would just underachieve after overachieving last year. So I'd safe to say we got it right about the Giants.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they could have done a little bit more if Daniel Jones was maybe healthy, but he was pretty not healthy for most of the season. And they were starting Tommy DeVito. So I'm surprised they finished ahead of the Commanders, honestly.
That's true. I mean, I think Tyrod Taylor is competent. So when he came back in, they won a few games down the stretch. They finished the season 2-3, or the last 5 were 2-3 with a big win against the Eagles that the last week of the season. So they started off the worst possible way. They lost 40-0 at home to the Cowboys, and it was kind of downhill from there. Daniel Jones was just getting beat up left and right. Then he tore his ACL, and it was just downhill from there. So it's almost a credit to them that they won 6 games, but they probably wish they didn't win 6 games so they could draft Daniel Jones' replacement. But anyway, we were right.
Yep.
Commanders. We said if things would go well, then Sam Howell would be the guy. If things did not go well, then Sam Howell was not the guy, and Ron Rivera is not the guy. It was also a weird transitional season because they have the new owners, which happened, just before the season started. So it was pretty clear that there was going to be a lot of change. They end up going 4-13. They have one of the worst point differentials in the NFC, and they're just, I think they're picking second in the draft, which is appropriate for them. But I think we got it right there as well.
Yep.
Any thoughts on the comments?
Yeah, I mean they hired a great GM here in Adam Peters. So hopefully that's the start of a turnaround here for them. But yeah, abysmal season. Sam Howell's not the guy. He's probably a slightly average starter. Maybe you could make the case for that. But that's about it. Everything else just went wrong, and they traded away guys like Chase Young and Montez Sweat. So I mean,
yeah,
they were tanking early.
Probably won a couple. They probably would have won a couple more games if they started Jacoby Brissett, but it's almost okay that they went 4-13. So they're going to get either Drake May or Caleb Williams. It's a potential Bill Belichick team. So maybe we'll revisit them during the offseason if he does end up, Belichick does end up going to Washington. So NFC North. This one was kind of all over the place. We differed quite a bit with our predictions. Your predictions. You picked Packers, Vikings, Lions, Bears. I picked Vikings, Lions, Packers, Bears. So we were both wrong about the division winners, despite our different opinions about the teams in the division. But we'll start at the top. The Detroit Lions. So, best case scenario, Jared Goff is good. The defense is better. They have a ton of weapons. Their offense is lights out at home. Their defense is just good enough to, be passable and win, a couple games, get some stops here and there. They end up 12-5, which is their best record in 30 years. They win a playoff game for the first time in 30 years. So, what did you get right and what did you get wrong about the Lions? Because I remember you being pretty wrong.
I'll admit it. I was super wrong about the Lions here. I thought they were going to regress a little bit. I think they also got helped out a little bit with, the Vikings having that Kirk Cousins injury as well. So yeah, I mean, I think overall, it was the best case scenario for them, and I was picking in the worst case scenario against them. And so Goff looked like a pretty above average starter. Their defense was pretty solid. They seem to have come on a bit, and so they're making progressions. And who knows? We might see the Lions in the NFC Championship game. We might see the Lions in the Super Bowl. We don't know. Um,
I mean,
it's
yeah.
it's
Again, we're
is that
recording this
yeah
on the 18th,
yeah
couple days before the divisional round. They're playing the Buccaneers, so that's a game they should win. I think they're favored by at least a touchdown, if not more.
yep
Um, yeah, I mean, I think one thing both of us couldn't have predicted was how good the rookie class would be. They
mm-hmm.
got 20 or 21 touchdowns total from Sam Laporta, who's like all of a sudden looking like the best tight end in the league. Jahmyr Gibbs looks like one of the most explosive weapons in the league. So those two guys, I mean, I think we undersold how good they could be. So, but I definitely thought they would be good. I didn't pick them to win the division, but I thought they'd be a playoff team at least.
yep yep
So the team that finished second was the Green Bay Packers. They went 9-8, so just a tad over 500. I had them as third in the division. You had them winning the division. I think the best case scenario was about Jordan Love taking that leap, the other receivers taking a leap, those young guys, the defense being, again, okay, good enough to get them in, and that's pretty much what happened. So what made you believe that Jordan Love was going to be the answer coming into the season?
Yeah, no, I mean, I felt like his situation was very similar to when Aaron Rodgers inherited the team from Brett Favre. He had a lot of time to learn. That's kind of been the Packers' approach, and then they churn out great quarterbacks that way. So I thought, it took Jordan. I think Jordan Love struggled a little early on in the season, and the Packers could have had a much better record. But those were the growing pains of being a first-time starter, and they snuck in. And Jordan Love's been actually, I think, like over the last like 1 month of the season, he's been playing like a top 5 quarterback. So he's a scary quarterback to play against, and I'm not looking forward to it when we play the Green Bay Packers here. But they are a very hot team. They finished the season very hot.
Their last 5, they were 3-2. Again, I think they were also helped out by the Kirk Cousins injury because they got
100%.
They got to go into Minnesota playing against Jaren Hall, which is a different question or different challenge compared to Kirk Cousins. But I think my fear was that Jordan Love was going to be just okay. I didn't think they had enough weapons. I thought the defense was going to be, again, just okay. So I thought, I was like, okay, they'll be in the 6-7 win range. But I think I was looking like I was right in the beginning of the
close.
season.
You're about to hit it, and then
they were like 2-3 or something like that. Yeah. And then I remember
Jordan Love just turned it on.
Exactly. I remember watching him against the Raiders in primetime on Sunday night, and I was like, "Eesh, this guy, I don't know." We had a lot of questions. He threw a couple really bad interceptions where it was just like mental mistakes, where he's not seeing the linebacker and things like that. He just didn't look comfortable. He didn't look confident. And then I think that win on Thanksgiving against the Lions just kind of turned things around, and all of a sudden they're fighting for a playoff spot, and they're above 500, and they go into Dallas and have one of the bigger upsets. I think they were a 10-point dog going into that game. So it was a remarkable turnaround for this team. And the fact that I think Aaron Jones missed a lot of the season, then he came back healthy and fresh at the end. And so it was just like a lot of factors, but I think, they have a bright future. I think we can definitely say. So
100%.
The Vikings. I picked them to win the division. You picked them to finish second ahead of the Lions. They just got devastated by injury, right? That was just the worst case scenario. But even before that, we talked about their 10-0 or 11-0 in one-score games in the 2022 season. That was definitely not the case, even with Kirk Cousins. But they definitely had a fighting chance. I think they were 2-3 or something like that. They were fighting back and had a chance to at least challenge for a wild card spot before everything just kind of went to shit for them with all the injuries. So what made you think that the Vikings were going to finish second in the division? And of course, I think it's pretty obvious, but what did we get wrong about the Vikings?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, right, healthy Kirk Cousins. I think we had, both of us had just watched the quarterback show on Netflix. We were super like, oh man, Kirk Cousins is a tough dude, he's gonna make it through. And unfortunately that didn't happen. But the last game, I think before his injury, he took down the 49ers in prime time. And he played really well that game. So I think, that's why we thought the Vikings could have won the division or finished second. It was really on Kirk Cousins, and then obviously the Justin Jefferson injury. Things just started piling up, and that's kind of the beginning of the end there for the Vikings. So we'll see. I don't know if Kirk Cousins stays on the Minnesota Vikings. It'll be a very interesting offseason for those guys. And we'll see what we predict them for next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he'll have a lot of suitors. I mean, he's 36, 35, 36, but coming off the Achilles, but it's the modern era. I don't know. I think he'll have a lot of teams coming after him. But yeah, it's pretty simple. You lose your starting quarterback, you lose your starting wide receiver, things are just not going to go well. So the Bears, this was a really interesting team. We both had them finishing last in the division, but I think we had different opinions of how bad or good they would look. They end up 7-10. They have a minus 19 point differential, so pretty fine margins there. If I recall correctly, you thought they were going to be terrible. I thought they were going to be around this range, 6-7 wins. What did we get right and what did we get wrong about the Bears?
Yeah, I think for me, I was thinking their defense was just going to be awful. And it was to start the season, and then they make that Montez Sweat trade. They actually become a pretty solid defense after that trade. And then I thought, Justin Fields, he's just an average quarterback. Will he really figure it out? And he seemed to, he got hurt, but he seemed to have stretches where it looked like he can be the guy. But there's obviously questions around, will the Bears bring him back? Because they have the number 1 pick from the Panthers. So, the thing, he started off the season strong, got hurt, and then kind of came back again and showed like he could be the guy. But I think the Bears, I was wrong. They didn't look absolutely horrendous. They looked pretty average. But they still finished last year, and I think depending on what they do at quarterback, they might have a good team going into next season. Yeah,
I think there's a world where if he doesn't miss those 3-4 games in the middle of the season and not starting Tyson Bagent, I think Tyson Bagent went 1-3. They'll beat the Raiders, lost to the Chargers, lost to the Saints, and then lost, I think, to the Commanders. Was it? Or maybe they beat the Commanders. I'm not sure. But anyway, if Justin Fields is out there, maybe they win 2 more games and they're the ones that are 9-8 and finishing the division. I mean, he had a chance. They were still technically kind of alive the last season or the last game of the season against the Packers, and I think they didn't show up. But the defense, like you said, was the big difference. They were awful in the beginning. They make that Montez Sweat trade, like you said, and then the last half of the season, they were not a dominant defense, but pretty close to being, a dominant defense, which I think gives them a lot of confidence going into next year. But to me, the Justin Fields era is over. I think he's good, but he's not. I don't think he's good enough to carry a team, and I think it's impossible to pass up on the opportunity that Caleb Williams provides as, a potential generational. Like, I think we can say, like, with 100% certainty that Justin Fields is not a generational quarterback, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the point. But do we know for sure that Caleb Williams and Drake May are?
No, absolutely not. But that's the point. You gotta gamble, right? It's like
you gotta gamble. Yeah. I mean, but you can win with Justin Fields. I don't know if you can win with those guys yet. You have to. That's the gamble.
But you also have to pay Justin Fields. That's the other factor, you do right? Have to pay, so yeah. I'll just go on record and I'll say the Bears absolutely should draft Caleb Williams with the number 1 pick. It's not every year that you get 2 picks in the top 10 like they have, and you got to take advantage with it, with the potential, big swing at quarterback. So the NFC South, this division was all over the place. So your prediction, we're actually pretty closely aligned. You said Saints, Falcons, Panthers, Bucks. I said Saints, Falcons, Bucks, Panthers. So we were, at least I was right about the Panthers. But yeah,
you got one thing right in this division.
Yeah, right. Well, this division was kind of goofy, right? It was basically open until the end of the season. They were really all clustered together at the top. The Bucks were 9-8, the Saints were 9-8, the Falcons were 7-10. And the Panthers were 2-15. So aside from the Panthers, who finished with the worst record in the league, everybody else was kind of clustered at the top. So we'll start with the Buccaneers. They obviously won the division by very close margins. I think they won the division because they had the better conference record. So them and the Saints had the same divisional record. but the in the conference, which for some reason is the tiebreaker, I don't know why that's the case, but that was the case. So what did we get wrong about the Bucks? Because clearly we were both very wrong about that.
Yeah, I was very, very wrong. I think there was two things. One was we underestimated Baker Mayfield in terms of how well he actually played this season. We're like, oh, it's Baker Mayfield. He was terrible on the Panthers. He was not that great on the Rams last year. So, he's just going to come in, be a below average quarterback, and that's it. That's the writing on the wall for the Bucks. Defense is not going to be that good. And actually, both those things turned out wrong. Baker Mayfield was an average to an above average starter. There were games where he looked really good. And then their defense was actually pretty solid with the guys they had still there. So I think that both those combination of things actually made them a much better team than we anticipated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had, I think, one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL, but they had a really good run defense. So they were at least good at one of those things. And Baker, I think the bigger concern for me was just like his health. Like he hasn't been able to stay healthy for 2-3 years now. Just and eventually, I think one thing that you said during our original pod, which I remember, is that he was going to win some games on accident because of the weapons that he had.
Did.
Yeah, basically. And then you think about it, you're like, okay, outside, he has Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Those two guys, when healthy, are probably a top 5 duo in the NFL. I mean, yeah, I think that's fair to say. Top 10 if we want to be really stringent. Yeah. But he had 2 great receivers on the outside. Rachaad White was a revelation as a running back. He was a great versatile weapon for them. So I think there's they won it by fine margins basically, and then they end up getting kind of lucky with the Eagles, who are on the downturn. I think in most cases, like in most seasons, if you play the season out, another 10 times, they're probably 7-10 or 6-11 or whatever. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I think he's going to get an extension with the Bucks. I think he's earned it, but I don't think they're going to come into next season saying like, okay, like we're going to repeat as division winners just because of they barely won it, and that's okay. Yeah. I don't want to give us too much of a hard time for thinking that they wouldn't be great, but
I mean, let's be real. Who was picking the Bucks to win the division? I don't think anyone was.
Not a soul. I will say that. Nobody outside of the Tampa Bay area.
I even think the Tampa Bay fans weren't picking them to win the division.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, for sure. So the next team, the New Orleans Saints, they went 9-8. I had them winning the division. So did you. They had the best point differential in the division. They won. They were plus 75. And again, they lost out on the division because of a conference tiebreaker, because they split the season series with the Buccaneers. So what did we get right? What did we get wrong about the Saints?
Yeah, I think we were pretty spot on about the Saints, like in terms of how we viewed them coming into the season. Obviously, the thing that went wrong was Derek Carr got hurt. So he didn't play a few games. He had that elbow injury, right? I think it was elbow injury.
He didn't. It was weird because he didn't miss any
concussion,
games.
And then he had like the concussion, right? Like he had some weird things going on with him.
So he didn't miss any games.
I thought he missed a game or two.
He was like he got knocked out at halftime against the Packers, so early on the season. And then he got knocked out around the third quarter against the Lions when they were making a comeback. So there was a few games where he got knocked out of them against Minnesota as well.
Got him. Yeah.
But he didn't miss any games, so he's a tough SOB. I'll say that.
Yeah, and so I think when that happens, you lose your starting quarterback halfway through the game. Things can go wrong. You lose some of those games. And I don't know. There was times where it just didn't seem like Derek Carr was fully healthy, like based on some of the throws he was making, some of the way he was seeing the game. Like there were just games where it just looked he was off, right? And but then on the flip side, there were games where he was like 100% on, and we saw him utilize his weapons and play really well. So I think that was kind of maybe where we sort of got it wrong, where Derek Carr was not exactly the quarterback we thought he was going to be. But I think a lot of that was like when you get knocked out three different games, and you have shoulder problems and elbow problems and all these things going on in the season, it's hard to be that quarterback that people want you to be.
Yeah, I think this was a really weird team, very Jekyll and Hyde type team.
Yep.
I think there was some issues initially with the offense. They were just not on the same page. Carr with his receivers. There was a lot of shuffling in and out, a lot of injuries. Michael Thomas played a few games and bounced out. Kamara missed a couple games because suspension. Just a lot of kind of a revolving door. But this is the team that, went into New England, kicked the shit out of the Patriots. They blew out the Bucks a couple weeks before. They blew out the Falcons. They went 4-1 to end the season. But at the same time, they go into Minnesota and get blown out. They lose. Yeah. They basically get blown out by the Rams. They make a comeback, but it wasn't a close game. So it was just a really up and down team. But we thought they would be, 9-10 wins. So we were right about that. We just didn't predict that the Bucks would be right there with them, and again win the division by a tiebreaker essentially.
Yep.
So the Atlanta Falcons, we both had them finishing second in the division. They finished third. What did we get right, and what did we get wrong about the Falcons?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were pretty spot on when we're like, Arthur Smith is the head coach of this team. The offense is not going to be that great. That's exactly what happened. There were moments where they did look good, but then Arthur Smith was like, "No, I'm not going to allow this to happen. I'm going to put Desmond Ritter back in when Taylor Heineke was there, and keep flip flopping on those quarterbacks." That was the weirdest situation. Not utilizing the guy you picked in with the top 10 pick in Bijan Robinson. Some games it was just weird. It was just a weird situation, and I think they achieved better than what maybe some people thought. Based on like the situation with their quarterbacks, where they went Desmond Ritter, Tyler Heineke, Desmond Ritter, Tiny Hallett. I when they started doing that, I was like, what are the Falcons doing? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But I think you get a real quarterback on that team. Get him a coach like Bill Belichick, Jim Harbaugh, maybe. And
I can't believe Bill Belichick.
Yeah,
is
he interviewed there. I can't believe it either.
I'm loving the jokes about like, what does an interview with Bill Belichick look like? And it's like, it's obvious he's going to be interviewing you. That's what it is. When people are talking about, oh, what are you going to talk to Bill Belichick 3 hours? Like, what are you going to ask him? It's like, no, he's interviewing you, your organization. He's seeing what your setup is like, all that stuff. But anyway, the Falcons, like you said, we were both pretty spot on. We both knew that the Desmond Ritter quarterback situation was not going to last for long, and it didn't. But what I didn't expect was that flip-flopping. It's like, either commit to one guy, bring in somebody else. This flip-flopping, I want to say it was Bill Parcells, maybe. Somebody said, if you have two quarterbacks that you're constantly going to, you don't have any quarterbacks. So you have to stick with one guy, build that confidence, do all that stuff. And it's clear Desmond Ritter's not the guy. But like you said, it was just weird. They have all these weapons on offense. They have like a potentially elite group of weapons. We saw Bijan doing crazy stuff. We saw Kyle Pitts making crazy plays. Drake London is an above average. He's good, just downright good. And they just couldn't take advantage of that. And their defense was pretty solid as well. So this is a team that, like you said, right quarterback, right coach. Hopefully it's not Bill Belichick, as somebody that's rooting for the Saints right now. But they get the right guy in there, and all of a sudden they're going to be competitive and fighting for this division. So I think, again, we were pretty spot on here. The last team, the Panthers, they finished last in the division. You had them finishing third. I had them finishing last. So what went wrong for the Panthers, or was this kind of what we expected?
I have maybe had a little higher expectations of Bryce Young. Clearly, he did not look that good. He's already getting the bust label here after 1 year, which is, I think, a little unfair. But I think the Panthers' offensive line was not great, and so that's contributed a little bit to the struggles. Miles Sanders wasn't the weapon we thought he was. Adam Thielen kind of had a surprisingly good season, but that was about the only bright spot there on the Panthers, and their defense did not look good at all.
Actually, the defense was pretty good. They had a pretty, I want to say they were like a top 10 defense.
Were they really? Okay, I thought they were not. I mean, I know they had some games where they held teams to like the Bucks and things like that to like 3 points, and they still lost the game or something like that. Like they've had, I guess the offense was just horrendous. Maybe that's the real issue. Is the offense was just really, really bad. I think like they were like number 32 in the league, right, in terms of offensive ranking for sure.
Yeah.
So
I think for all the reasons that you pointed out, I mean, they just Bryce Young. It's hard to evaluate him based on this season, just because Frank Reich was just not the right coach for him. The offensive line was awful, one of the worst. He was just constantly getting beat up, and all of his receivers and his weapons were just trash. I don't think you could name the tight end. I want to say they had a tight end that was like that retired midseason for some like a concussion. He had some like brain damage, something crazy like that. And all of their receivers were just kind of you said Adam Thielen had a good season. I think he was the only guy there. It's
Yeah,
like
he's the only guy who could catch the ball, right?
if you're down 25, 30 points, you're going to be throwing the ball. Like somebody has to catch it eventually, right? You're playing against a prevent defense. Somebody's going to catch the ball. And honestly, it's a surprise that they won 2 games. The way that I guess their defense was pretty good at some points. They had a really good pass defense, if I remember correctly, but this was just a nothing team, and it's just a disaster that they get the number 1 pick again. And they have to trade up for the number 1 pick last year, but they get the number 1 pick and they don't even get to pick, Marvin Harrison Jr. or somebody like that. So it's kind of a tragedy.
I think they made the mistake of trading up for Bryce Young. I mean, when they could have just waited and gotten Caleb Williams again.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
they probably would have started Andy Dalton, but I mean, he was good enough to win. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5
wherever
games.
You want and get another number 1 pick, and draft where you were and figure it out from there. Like I think they could have sat where they were and got an Anthony Richardson, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So I don't know what the Panthers were doing. I don't know why they made that trade, and now it's cost them a number 1 pick.
Yeah, I don't think the Panthers know what they're doing either. So last but definitely not least, the NFC West. So we were both aligned in terms of predictions. We said 49ers, Seahawks, Rams, and Cardinals. It ended up being 49ers, Rams, Seahawks, Cardinals. So we'll start with the Niners. I think we were both pretty spot on here, but did we get anything wrong about the 49ers? I don't think we did.
No, I don't think we did. Maybe you were hating on Brock Purdy. I don't know, but
I was not.
I'm just messing with you. No, I think we thought this is exactly how I was going to go for the Niners if they got Bosa back in tow. I think when we were recording, we weren't sure if Bosa was coming back, and then a few days later, we ended up signing. So this is exactly how we thought it was going to play out for the Niners. There was a stretch where I was a little worried, where they lost 3 straight games. That was a little concerning. You're like, uh-oh, what's going on here? Losing to the Browns, losing to the Vikings. Can't even remember the third team we lost to now. Is that irrelevant? Bengals. That's what it was. Bengals at home. Yeah, I see you keeping track, Holland.
I mean, it was a big game. It was still when Joe Burrow was there. I was proud of myself for picking that game right. I think I picked the Bengals to win that game.
Yeah, and then, surprisingly get a bye, and then things get back on track here. So outside of that, I mean, that was the only part of the season where it looked kind of a little iffy at that point. But yeah, we're back on track. I think the Niners are the favorite out of the NFC. So
by far, I think they're the Super Bowl. Well, maybe not the Super Bowl favorite because they lost to the Ravens.
I think the Ravens. Yeah, I think the Ravens are more favored to win the Super Bowl than the Niners. But I think the Super Bowl matchup that's favored is Ravens Niners.
Yeah, which would be awesome.
I don't want to see that, Colin. I don't want to see that again.
Oh, you don't want to see the Ravens, but I get it. It'd be fun for the neutral fan or the non-neutral fan like me. It went exactly as we predicted. Like you said, we didn't know if Bosa was going to sign or hold out, and he signed pretty quickly after we recorded the pod. And we just said, if everyone is healthy, this is the best team in the NFC. This is the best defense. This is the best group of weapons, all that stuff. And then, like you said, during that 3-game stretch, it was the same time that you lost Trent Williams, you lost Deebo Samuel, so 2 of the elite guys on the team, 2 of the all-pro guys on the team. So, but yeah, the rest of the season went exactly as we thought it would. And now we get to see what this team looks like, at home against some elite competition, and they'll likely, they are, like you said, the favorites to make the Super Bowl. The next team, the Rams. I think we definitely got this very wrong. Both of us, I think we're both saying that they would finish 3rd in the division, and if the Cardinals weren't there, we would have picked them to finish last in the division. So what did we get wrong about the Rams?
Yeah, I think we were pretty wrong in terms of the decline of Matthew Stafford. He actually stayed relatively healthy. I think maybe he missed 1 game, 2 games. Maybe even half a game, if that.
I think against the Cowboys, he missed that game.
That's what it was. Yeah, he missed 1 game there. But he's relatively healthy, and he looked pretty solid. I know Cooper Kupp got hurt early on, but they had this emergence of this rookie, Puka Nakau, right? And he looked pretty good. So
Yeah, pretty
The
good
offense
is
looked.
an understatement.
I mean, he looked amazing, and then
Yeah.
Kyron Williams came onto the scene, and he looked amazing. So they somehow found weapons out of guys that nobody thought were weapons, right? And I think their defense did not struggle like we thought they would have. Still a pretty decent defense. I mean, I think they were league average. If that's right,
Mhm.
Holland. So and I think they got helped a little bit with the struggles of Seattle. And that propelled them up here. But
Yeah,
they
I
they
wanna
did
say
not
they
look as
were
bad as we thought they were.
no, absolutely. I think going into the season, right, it was Cooper Kupp was gonna miss 4 or 5 games with that hamstring
Yep.
injury. He was on IR. We're like, "Oh, Matt Stafford didn't finish last season because of a freaking spinal injury." So, we're basically saying, "Okay, he's probably not gonna finish this season." There was even talk about him retiring, and then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, they win 10 games, and I think the one thing that we didn't predict, I don't think anybody could have predicted, was how amazing these young guys were going to be. This rookie class was going to be. You get an all pro, literally an all pro wide receiver. I think he's first team all
Yeah.
pro, Puka Nakua in the 5th round. Kyron Williams, like you said. And then on defense, they draft a guy, Kobe Turner. I think he was a mid round pick. He's like a defensive rookie of the year candidate. Byron Young, another D lineman. I know everybody's going to look better next to Aaron Donald, but you still have to be good. These guys
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely,
100%.
so this was a team that I think on paper we looked at, we're like, oh, there's nothing remarkable about this team. Who the hell is Kyron Williams? Oh, who is this Nakua kid out of, BYU? Like, okay, whatever, I'm sure he'll catch some passes because he's the only guy on the team. But it ended up being he's, like I said, an all pro receiver, and everything just kind of worked out for them. And they were neck and neck with Seattle. I mean, Seattle was only, 1 game behind them, but we definitely didn't predict how well things would have turned out. And of course, they lose by 1 point on the road with some questionable calls in Detroit. And, a couple snaps go their way, and all of a sudden it's them playing the Niners in the divisional round, or I think they would have played the Eagles, whatever it was, or the Bucks,
No,
Lions.
they would have. They would have
They
played.
played the Niners.
They would have played. They would have played. Well, if they beat the Lions, they would have played the Bucks. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. Because
So
the
yeah, and
Packers are
then
still the lowest seed.
and then all of a sudden they might have made the NFC Championship
But
game because they
yeah.
probably would have been favored even in Tampa. So anyway, definitely just everything went right when we thought it was going to go wrong. Next, the Seattle Seahawks. They were 9-8. They had a minus 38 point differential, and we picked them to finish second in the division. I think we were pretty spot on. Maybe there were some things about, the offense and Geno that maybe we didn't predict, but what did we get right and wrong about the Seahawks?
No, I agree with your assessment. I think we were pretty spot on. I think we're hovering around 10 wins for the Seahawks, right? They came in at 9. I think, yeah, like you said, right? There's Geno kind of regressed a little bit. The offense didn't look as sharp at certain times in the season as it should have. It was definitely was not humming like it was last season. And I think even the defense was just there were some regression points in their defense too. But it was just they were just an average team, and that's turned out what it ended up being, where we thought they might have been slightly above average based on last year. And
Yeah, I
now,
think we were
well,
both picking them to be a
yeah,
wild card team, and they,
yep,
it's. I think you're on point if you're like, okay, if you're on track to potentially get a wild card spot in the last week of the season, which is the spot they were in. I think they got eliminated before kickoff, or maybe halfway through the Cardinals
yep.
game. But yeah, they were 9-8. Geno Smith missed a game or two. They were just really bad in the red zone, from what I recall. There was just a couple games where they just had chances to win it. Geno couldn't get the job done, and I think they probably know he's not the long-term answer there anymore, and they're probably going to start exploring some options there. They end up firing Pete Carroll, so who the hell knows who the coach is going to be. So, I think a year or two, Osama and I did a Legion of Boom retrospective, because the era was officially over, right? Bobby Wagner was gone. And now he's back, but they traded Russell Wilson, but Pete Carroll was still there. So now there's a lot of questions about what is this team going to look like moving forward. They're obviously entering a new era. He was there for a long time, I think 10, 15 years. So a lot of questions to be asked about the Seahawks. Lastly, the Arizona Cardinals. We both picked them to finish last. They went 4-13. I think, things went just about as we predicted. But was there anything that we got wrong about the Arizona Cardinals?
No, I don't think so, but I do think you said it would be the end of the Kyler Murray era in
I
Arizona, and I
did.
don't think that's gonna be the case. I don't think that's gonna be the case. I think he's sticking around there.
Yeah, that was the big thing. I thought my gut was telling me, okay, he's going to miss, the first 8 games of the season. They're going to be, 0-8, 1-7, whatever it was. And they were either going to just basically shut him down for the rest of the year because he's coming off of ACL and then look to trade him, or they were going to move him during the year, which I think is less likely. But he looked really good. I think they're picking in the top 5. They have a chance to get Marvin Harrison Jr. I think they're picking 4th, I want to say.
Are they picking behind the Patriots?
Yeah, I think top 4 is Bears by way of Panthers, the Commanders, the Patriots, and
Yep.
then the Cardinals. So you
I think it's
think,
Cardinals. Yep.
you go 3 for 3 on quarterbacks, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there and you can get the best wide receiver prospect since, I don't know, Calvin Johnson. So that team is going to look interesting next year. I think Kyler Murray answered some questions about his durability, and he's like, okay, I'm back. I think the first game he came back, he was running around just like he was before the injury. But, it's the ACL, and it's, again, 2023, 2024. So these things just don't affect you as much as they used to. But, yeah, so and Jonathan Gannon, I definitely did not think he was going to be a half-decent coach. They won some games that they shouldn't have. They beat the Cowboys with Josh Dobbs. They went into Philadelphia and they beat the Eagles. So they even overachieved despite winning the 4 games. And they probably wish they didn't. But again, they're setting the tone and they're establishing some groundwork. So yeah, I guess the Cardinals were exactly where we predicted them. So that's it for the retrospective. Do you have any thoughts about the playoffs? I know we're a couple days away from the divisional round. But yeah, I want to hear your Super Bowl predictions.
Niners Ravens.
Niners Ravens, yeah.
I mean, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, Baltimore looks like they're gonna run through that AFC. I don't really see anyone opposing them. Maybe Kansas City, maybe the Bills, maybe. But their defense was nasty. Will continue to be nasty. The only thing that can stop them is an injury to Lamar. That's really it.
Yep, pretty much.
So,
what was your biggest?
That.
Yeah, we don't want to see that. Nobody wants to see that.
No.
What was your biggest surprise and what was your biggest disappointment from the NFC? We'll start with biggest surprise.
Biggest surprise. Oh, yeah, I think it's the Bucks winning the division. That was the biggest surprise for me there. I did not see that coming. That was amazing that the Bucks are even in the divisional round right here of the playoffs. Like that is beyond shocking to me.
Yeah, I think they were favored to win like 4 or 5 games. So to win even to double that is pretty ridiculous. So biggest disappointment.
Ridiculous. I mean, biggest disappointment is the Eagles. I think. Just kind of how their season ended. They were coming off that Super Bowl high. People are like, this team looks pretty good. They're gonna be back in it. Everything. Just didn't happen. I guess it was a disappointment to see that happen, and I guess that's the curse of losing the Super Bowl, right?
Yep. Yeah, it kind of came in like a different way. You usually don't see it where a team starts 10-1. Usually the Super Bowl loser hangover is, you don't even make the playoffs.
It's more pronounced.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, they're, probably like the worst 11-6. I mean, their net point differential was 5.
Wow.
They were plus 5 despite, winning 11 games. So that says a lot, I think, about the team. For me, I think other than the Bucks, I want to say the Packers were the biggest surprise for me, especially the way things started. I was like, oh man, like I didn't think they were going to give up on Jordan Love after the season, but I thought, this was just like a rebuilding year. Aaron Rodgers is gone. Let's kind of trim the fat, get rid of some of the other guys there, and we'll come back next year and fight for the division. Biggest disappointment, I guess the Eagles, but we saw it happening. We're like, okay, Super Bowl hangover. They lost to both coordinators. So the more you think about it, it made a little more sense. I think for me, the biggest disappointment was probably the Vikings, just because of the injuries and things like that. Yeah. I really thought they would win the division, and I think they still have more talent than anybody else in that, maybe they're neck and neck with Detroit, but obviously injuries and things like that just completely derailed the season. So Again, we're recording this on the 18th of January, so a couple days before the divisional round. We'll see how things shake out. Definitely do some more pods before the Super Bowl. And we appreciate you guys listening. Make sure to check us out on all the major platforms at 4040 Vision Pod. That's Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all that good stuff. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you, Salman. Thanks, man.
Peace.